everybody. Donna Schwartz here from the Everything Saxophone Podcast. I have two guests today, but they're both from the Ted Klum Mouthpiece Company. Okay, so I was trying to meet with these guys at NAMM. They were so busy. Every time I went over to the booth, like it was crazy busy, or it was so noisy on the floor. People don't understand how noisy it gets at NAMM. And I'm so happy that they were so busy. It was great. But we were able to get the chance to meet outside of NAMM. And I'm so happy to have Ted Klum and Michael Howe from Ted Klum Mouthpieces on the Saxophone Podcast. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. So listen, if, I've known about Ted Klum for a while, but some people don't. So Ted, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, yourself in terms of like your playing and how you started the company and why you started the company?
Sure, I'm happy to. Well, obviously, first and foremost, I'm a saxophone player, and I really got into this whole thing at first to try and please myself to get to the sound that, I was having such a problem or trouble getting to the sound I had in my head with the equipment that was available. And, like so many other people, I was on the search at a fairly young age in my saxophone career to try and find the ultimate mouthpiece to get to what I heard in my head and be able to achieve that sound. And that eventually led me to Bob Ackerman, and who was advertising himself as the mouthpiece doctor at the time, and he was dealing vintage horns. And he introduced me to Everett Matson, who was my first real teacher. He was a real master, a saxophone mouthpiece, clarinet mouthpiece, refacer of renown from years ago. And he's the one who really taught me the first techniques. And he showed me he was a real artist and a scientist as well. So his techniques and the artistry of that and the science of that, he showed me, and I absorbed it and started doing it myself. And after a few years, I was doing it for friends as well as myself, and having good results. And eventually I started, Bob Ackerman started hiring me to do some lost wax castings and vintage pieces as well. And the lost wax castings were from a South American company, a Brazilian company, Bové and Norberto. And those guys, they were pretty good at coming up with good blanks, I'll call them, that just needed final finishing and refacing to become good mouthpieces or great mouthpieces. But they would kind of disappear for months at a time, and they were a little hard to get in touch with at times. So I decided at one point in my life that I need to get my own source of blanks.
Okay.
And I was introduced to a man, Jean Borantal, who's a casting company owner, who became kind of my mentor with that. And I started getting castings from him, and he started watching me finish out copies of Autolink Super Tone Masters castings. And he said, "Why are you doing such an amazing job? Why aren't you putting your own name on it? We have a prototyping department right here on premises. So, let's get a CAD file going for you and design your own mouthpiece." And that's what I did. And that was kind of how the company was born.
How long ago was that?
That was in 2006.
Got it. Okay, cool. And were you always based in New Jersey? Like, did you grow up in New Jersey?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
I mean, I was born
yes.
in New York, but I was basically Long Island and New Jersey
Oh,
is where
okay.
I grew up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Long Island here too. So
All right.
I
Port
kind
Washington.
all right, New Hyde Park. There we go.
Hmm.
That's awesome. It's such a small world. All right, so this is interesting. So, you got the castings, the blanks, and all that kind of stuff, and then you started with the refacing, and then you started to do the castings, and then creating the Auto Link Super Tone Masters, and then you got the opportunity to create your own mouthpieces. So talk to me from that point, 2006. You're starting your own company. You're doing I guess your own line of mouthpieces, and probably I guess maybe refacings too and stuff like that. What happened at that point?
Yeah, well, this is a good way to describe it. I mean, I really started getting deep into refacing. It goes way back. That goes back to the 1980s, actually.
Wow.
I was I was refacing. I started refacing, for myself after studying with Everett Matson. I started refacing, and then I was really primarily an alto player then, but then I started getting into tenor and trying to figure out that, and that's when I started refacing more and more. And at that time, I didn't want to be known as a mouthpiece guy because I was playing. I had my own groups, and I had doing gigs here and there and this and that, and I didn't want all saxophone players calling me, bothering me to reface their mouthpiece. So I was actually using a pseudonym of Ken Tubbs, and that goes way back. That's kind of a funny old story, but
Huh.
um,
Why
that
do
was through the
I know
80s.
that? Wait, why do I know that? I've heard that. Oh my God.
Well, yeah, somebody might have said, "Oh, this was done by Ken Tubbs," or Bob Ackerman used to say it because I told him, "Don't tell him who I am. Don't tell him who I am."
Oh my God.
Um,
That's blowing my mind.
so
Okay.
yeah, there's probably some pieces floating around out there that have that stigma attached to them. But around in the 1990s, I started doing more and more work for Bob, and then like I'm trying to get my timeline straight. Um, Yeah, I moved from Union City to Little Falls, and then I opened a recording studio, and I had a record label, and that was keeping me kind of busy. And I was still doing refacing, but not at the level because I was so busy. And the recording thing, I was trying to survive. We had our son was born, and was trying to make some money, and the recording thing got to be a little too many late nights and some not so great sessions that you have to mix and master that stuff for hours on end, and it drove me crazy after a while. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna get back into the mouthpiece refacing, find my own source of blanks, and then I can listen to whatever music I want to while I'm working instead of having to hear the same whatever for hours on end. And that's that's when I decided to start asking around and find a source of castings that was local. And I got introduced to a great guy who really helped me out a lot and introduced me to his team of CAD designers. And my initial desire at the time for the first model, that was the first focus tone. And the name came about by, so many of my friends and clients and whatnot said, well, I want a link, but with a little more focus. Meaning they wanted a super tone master, but it was a little too spread or tubby, and they wanted a little tighter, more focused. So I designed that and went through a number of iterations. I think we're on version 10 now, and it's been that way for a number of years. But we went through a lot of variations with many hours sitting next to a CAD designer with Rhino and SolidWorks and all this stuff, and going through it, and then printing them and testing them, and then casting them and testing them, and just a lot of hours into that development and R&D.
That's interesting. I'm curious about this. I'm wondering if the studio work and you have to really love doing studio work, especially with the mixing and mastering. But I'm wondering with, having had that experience, I wonder if that and doing that for a little while and then getting full tilt back into the mouthpieces, I wonder if that actually helped in the sense of when you're mastering and you're mixing, you have to listen to detail. You have to pay attention to detail, and it could be monotonous. Listen to the same thing over and over again. And I wonder if that had any kind of impact into, future endeavors and stuff.
Well, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, to me, it's all related. Some people have kind of said, "Oh, you're like a Renaissance man. You get deep into all these different things." And I did get deep into the studio thing, and I was going for a particular sound, and it was around the time that it was moving from outboard gear to mixing in the box, as they call it, with all the plugins and this and that. So, I mean, my first studio stuff was Tascam D8, D88s, DA88s, and so digital, but tape-based digital. And, that was old school mixing with a console and this and that. And then right around that time, it turned to all in the box. And so I went through that change as it happened, which was really an incredible learning experience. But in terms of listening and dialing into specific things, I consider myself an artist, and whatever I'm applying that to, I want to have the same type of passion about it and the same type of focus or the same type of concentration. So when I'm spending time working really hard on a mouthpiece, trying to achieve a specific thing with the files and actually manipulating the material and to get a sound, I think of it the same way as if I was practicing a phrase and wanting to get it to swing a certain way or lock up with the drummer, or it's all connected. And I tell my guys that too. We're doing something that's it's supposed to be on a high level of really spirituality. Because I mean, people have said, well, one of the highest things you can do is work with your hands, and that sounds kind of funny. But in this world, if you think about it, we're human beings living on this planet, and if you can make money with your hands and survive, that's a noble thing, as opposed to some of the other things going on in this world. But I'm not going to get too deep into that. But that being said, I think, I never want to think of myself as anything other than an artist, but I want to apply that, first and foremost to my musicianship, but then to whatever I do with the mouthpieces, that's helping other musicians hopefully achieve what they're trying to get to. And I want to put real care and love into it, and to the point where they get something profound out of the sound that they weren't able to get from any other equipment that they tried. And thankfully, thanks to the creator, I've been able to achieve that to a certain degree because from the what people have told me. So I'm it's not like I'm just trying to make people happy, but I'm trying to do something on a high level that reflects how I feel about the music in general. I mean, in terms of playing the music, we've been left some real big shoes to fill, the greats that came before us. So I mean, if you want to study the music of Charlie Parker and Coltrane and all that, I mean, that's so Duke Ellington, Bud Powell, it's so profound and deep that if we can even get a little bit in there, then we're trying to continue something in our own little way. And that same kind of attitude with, well, if I'm going to make some equipment to help other people, I have to put that same kind of love and dedication into it as I would the music. And that's really where we're coming from. And everybody here that works here is a player, and they're on the same page in terms of what we're doing. We're not making a ton of money here. We're surviving, and we're doing quite well in terms of what we're trying to achieve, but we're not getting rich. But we're doing something that's enriching us in another way because it translates to other areas of our art. I mean, if you can do something great by making a great mouthpiece that makes someone else happy and put that love into it, then I think you should be able to apply that same thing to whatever you're trying to do musically and vice versa. At least that's how I feel about it.
That's awesome. There's so much to unpack here, but you know what? The word that's screaming out to me right now is impact. And another word is also legacy. A couple of things. So already like this theme of being detail oriented, getting into the nitty gritty. And it's not, it's not just for the sake of getting into it. It's because it's for the art of it. It's for the love of it. But it's the impact that you want to have, whether it's refacing a mouthpiece, whether it's creating a mouthpiece, whether it's having that studio and putting the time and the care into mixing and mastering it just right, to training your employees who are all players who exhibit the same kind of qualities, being all in, and being all in, which enriches them, but also being all in enriches the product, and then the product going out to performers like Mark Turner, like Emmanuel Wilkins, like Chi Lee, like many others. And it lets them spread their impact to their audiences and their students as well. So impact is a huge thing here.
Well, I'm trying to do something, trying to do something positive, and yeah, make an impact as best I can, humbly and with what I've been given. I mean, as artists, we're supposed to inspire each other and share with each other. And that's how we grow. And that's how we influence each other and become. I mean, if I think about all the people who've influenced me, then it's my obligation and duty to try and spread that and influence others with all the heaviness that they've impacted me with. I mean, guys like Bob Mover, who I studied with, very early on at Berkeley, he had a huge impact on me. I mean, standing next to him playing, I got every one of his ensembles that I could. And, just being next to him as he played was incredible for me at that age. And, he gave so much. He was so giving. So I'm trying to incorporate, and there's so many others. I mean, I could name a whole bunch of people, but trying to put that in everything I do and share that with other musicians is I think what it should be about. It seems like today everybody's trying to get over with their own thing, and there's a lot of negativity or backbiting, all kind of things in the industry, and I mean, it comes down to everybody's trying to survive, and we're all fighting for crumbs because, in the music that we, speaking about us, like to play, it's, everybody's going to wind up teaching to survive. And, if you get some tours, great, this and that. But I mean, to live a middle income lifestyle by just playing straight ahead jazz gigs, it,
Yeah.
it's not easy. So that being said, we have to come together more than try and separate, but everybody's fighting for crumbs because there's just not that many ways to survive out there. And the industry has changed in my lifetime so much, where it used to be when I was coming up, people got record deals and they had, there was tour support. Well, all that with streaming now, it's all gone. I've seen the whole change, and you can't go back in time. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is, you can't kill the idea of the art, and people are going to pursue it, whether they starve or not, or they're going to find a way to survive while pursuing what they love and what the creator put inside their heart, because otherwise they're going to go through life being miserable. So I'm trying to do that in my way and share as best I can through hopefully through my music, continue, to play, but to survive right now with this Mouthpiece company and making the best possible things that can allow other people to express what they hear in their heads and help them to get, where they're trying to go musically.
I got to tell you, this is really inspiring, and it's inspiring, it's refreshing, and what you talked about, where we're all trying to survive and going after crumbs. The interesting thing is that, and you also said this too, we can't go back. I mean, it's happened already, right? So we
Right.
have to be so adaptable, and the thing is that in our lifetimes too, just the amount of change has been so seismic. It's just
Mm.
it's just been so rapid, and especially since COVID. Yeah, well, especially since COVID, because people have had to adapt and to change and, to try to stand out and what the case may be. But the important point that you drive home is that, we are in this together. As musicians, we need to be together and, supporting each other. And that's the cool
Yes.
thing too with the podcast. Like every person I've interviewed, like never, never, and I say this to everybody, no one has ever said a bad word about anybody else. And that's awesome. That's the
Mm.
important thing, because the top people in their game, and those are a lot of the people that I interview, you get it. It is this higher calling. It's this higher calling to keep music forward, to keep bringing up generations of musicians, to support the ones that are out there right now. And what's cool is that you're putting this, you're adapting, but you're putting this old world touch into it, and let's talk about that too, because one of the things that sets you apart from some other companies, right? Because we all have to kind of have that thing nowadays, but it's this old world like craftsmanship that sets you apart. So let's talk about like your processes for, like creating mouthpieces and stuff.
Sure. Well, there's a specific set of parameters that all work together to make what I consider a great playing mouthpiece. And every saxophone player, when they get a great mouthpiece, they know it. It's reed friendly. It gives them ease of playing that they don't have with any other piece, and it suddenly becomes their quote unquote number one go-to mouthpiece. And um, I want to live on the block of differentiating between great and good, because there's a lot of good mouthpieces where you can compensate with the reed or whatever and kind of get out what you're doing. But when you have something that's really great, it frees you up. I remember making a mouthpiece and having a certain reed years ago for it lasted a whole summer. And I had to pinch myself to think I was dreaming because the setup was so good and it was coming out exactly how I wanted it to sound in my head. I was achieving that. And I was like, I just about cried when that reed finally died. But that kind of feeling I want for saxophone players because it's so hard, it's so fleeting. And, I mean, Frank Morgan quit because, not Frank Morgan, I'm sorry, Frank Strozier quit because, the reeds were just giving him too many problems. He was too frustrated. And, I hear it from everybody, sometimes the frustration level, and I've gone through it. And when you're trying to make a gig or a recording and you're going through reeds or mouthpieces and nothing's working, and then you think you have it, and then you get on the bandstand and it's like, oh, now I'm back to the one I thought was, that whole headspace can drive every saxophone player crazy. And I think every saxophone player has gone through a certain amount of that, if not a lot of that. And I'm trying to help that by making a mouthpiece that's great rather than just good, to the point where even the bad reeds are usable. Um, you know, but in terms of my process and how my inspiration for that, I mean, I've studied since I was about 20 years old, um, some really great mouthpieces that were created by great craftsmen. You talk about old world craftsmanship. Um, some of those early New York Meyer brothers pieces and the early New Yorks, the level of craftsmanship in the finishing. That's why they're so great. And a certain period of Link, Auto Link, the early Floridas, and even the early Babbitts, and there's different periods, and they have different levels of great craftsmanship. And you look at, I'm in there with the file and looking so close at all the details, and I see the level of skilled craftsmanship that you rarely find today. I'll
Mhm.
put it like that. Rarely find today. But besides executing that level of craftsmanship, it has to be coupled with specific parameters that all come together to make the mouthpiece actually respond correctly. Because it can be crafted beautifully and the work can look great, but can it still play? Not necessarily. It depends. There could be some critical things that aren't there. And that's the science side of it. Because on one hand, I'm a numbers guy and I measure constantly and I know I've been figuring out what works and why for the past 40 years. And that's why I've arrived to where I am now. And I mean, Michael can speak on some of that in terms of he was on a search and then we drafted him into the into the world here and he was enlightened then and he's like, wow, this is, so in terms of how different it is than what's out there, I think Michael could speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, my journey here is a long, winding road, I guess. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, um, and I ended up going to school at William Patterson University. Got my master's there. While I was there, I met Adam Nywood, who studied refacing from Ted. And then, Ted needed, some help, and Adam recommended me, and then that's how I started here. But before that, I was familiar with Ted's mouthpieces, and there was a couple I got to try, and I just remember every time, I felt like finally there was something that I wasn't compensating for. Like every mouthpiece I played before then, there was like, yeah, there's something really great about it, but it lacks in this one area, right? And then, coming here and really trying all these different things. Like you said, I mean, it enlightened me as to what makes a great mouthpiece, and of course, learning the various aspects of that go into making a mouthpiece from Ted has also, opened my eye a lot, and has given me the ability to discern everything that I try, and to understand what is affecting what within the mouthpiece.
I want to interrupt for a second, and there's a okay, a couple of things here. Discern everything I want to try, and then compensating. Can we dig into this for a second in terms of yeah, let's dig into this for a second. So, every player feels like, with certain, if the mouthpiece isn't right for them, like they have to compensate. Like, can you talk about that, like that journey and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I, like many saxophonists, we're kind of just in the dark with trying mouthpieces. You sort of just try what's around you, or gamble and buy something online that you don't try beforehand. And in my experience, I would get something and sort of be like, okay, like I have to live with this now. And I don't want to get into specifically what I had, but I had some vintage pieces and I had some newer pieces. And the vintage ones I had, there was one that I played on. Well, I guess I could say it was a Selmer Soloist that I played on for a really long time.
Got it.
And it was just, I got it because it was the best thing that I could try around. But it wasn't really reed friendly. And the higher end was really weird, and I was struggling really hard to play altissimo, and stuff like that. And I remember, like, after I started working here, I gave you the piece to check out, and you were just like, yeah, this is, the curve wasn't right. Various aspects of it wasn't right that was contributing to that. And, you know, seeing that was really impactful, because I feel like I've almost like grown musically, because I don't have to fight, my gear, my setup. And when playing becomes easier, ideas flow out that you never had before, or it's just it makes everything a lot easier when you're not fighting anything. So this journey has been like really incredible for me, and I hope other sax players get to have these epiphany moments, and like trying whatever piece, and feeling like, oh, I could finally do everything I've ever wanted.
Yeah, what's really interesting about that too, I say to a lot of people, you want the equipment to kind of, how do I want to word this? Get out of the way. Meaning that you want the equipment to be in such a way that you don't have to think about the equipment when you're playing. And I think that goes with like the compensating, and we're going to talk about the discerning in a second. But like when you're playing, you don't want to be thinking about, oh, okay, that's right. So when I get into this range, no matter what I do, no matter what reed I put on, what ligature, this, that, whatever the case may be, it's going to sound thin. You don't want to have, like, when you have that in your head, how could you possibly create? because you're in a different headspace. You
Yeah.
really are, And so having the ability to have the equipment get out of the way for you to be able to express it doesn't matter the level of play you're at either. Like if you're an intermediate player and you're struggling and you've tried everything and your embouchure is, again, you've got to make sure your embouchure is, good and all that kind of stuff. But, if you're struggling and it's the same thing that's going on and you're putting your mouthpiece on other horns and it's the same thing, then, and you're solid with your embouchure, then this is something that you've got to think about and discerning everything that you try. So I have a question for you then, based on your experience and also not only just working with Ted, but also like this epiphany time for you when you think about it. Like when someone tries out mouthpieces, what should they, this is going to be a personal thing, I get it, but what should they look for? What are, in your experience, like what are some of the things that they should try to play on the mouthpiece to discern, whether that piece is going to be something good for them? And it's not going to be answered in one trial. I totally get that. You got to try it over time, but like over your experience, like what should someone be looking for and testing when they're playing a mouthpiece?
It's a great question.
Before I answer that, I'll say that one should be if you're trying mouthpieces, you should prepare with having new reeds in different hardnesses and maybe different cuts, different brands or whatever, having a variety of reeds to try on whatever mouthpiece you're trying, because that's going to be a lot helpful. And even if it's the same reed, like if you just want to use the same brand and same size, it's best to try mouthpieces with new reeds because they could get kind of acquainted to whatever you have. So it's best to have a fresh start on a new mouthpiece. And the other thing is one thing that I've noticed a lot from people trying mouthpieces is some people have a difficult time lining up the reed properly. So we make our tips, our tip rails pretty thin. There's a number of ways in which it makes playing the mouthpiece better, but a lot of mouthpieces out there have very fat tip rails, so it does make it easier to line up the reed, but it then has negative aspects of the playing side of it. So to properly align the reed, make sure that you're pushing up the reed right to the tip rail and to make sure that it's really aligned as perfectly as you can to the rail, so that that any stuffiness that you feel is not from the mouthpiece or the reed, it's from misaligning it.
Yeah, let me just back that up and say so many times we've had people who are used to playing fat tip rail mouthpieces, and I just made a mouthpiece and I know the mouthpiece was playing great. I know it was killing. I hand them the mouthpiece and they're playing it and they're like, something's wrong in the middle. It's stuffy or something. I say, let me see how you got the reed on there. And I look at it and the reed is set so low that it's not actually covering the tip rail. It's barely covering, if at all. And that's because they're used to leaving a space because they're used to playing a fat tip rail and then lowering the reed to compensate for that. And now what happens if you play a fat tip rail and there's too much coverage, then the break in the middle of the horn, you hear the timbre so differently between D and C sharp and C that's because too much coverage. So we have a specific recipe for the width of the tip rail, but it is imperative in that case that you line the reed up correctly, because if it's too low, then you're missing the whole gain that you would normally get. And people say, well, you could have the fat tip rail and then just lower it, but then you've got extra mouthpiece in between your tongue and the tip of the reed, and it kind of softens or makes your articulation less accurate, a little more sluggish, because you're not able to really tongue correctly with the tip of the reed. So it does make, you could say it does make the mouthpiece more fragile in that You better not bang it into your teeth and dent the end of it. You have to be careful with the mouthpiece. That's just the fact of what it is. So lining up the reed correctly, having a proper tip rail that's less than a millimeter in width, and that is lining up with the reed properly is critical. And with trying mouthpieces, taking care in that regard is of paramount importance, as he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask something about that. This is really interesting because there's also this thing too where, like you talked about that wonder reed, that reed that lasts you all summer and you're like, please don't die. Right? Okay. And there's this thing that, like if a reed is too hard, then you do lower it a little bit. If a reed is too soft, you do raise it past the tip rail. So how would you react to something like that then?
Okay, I would address that in terms of that's a form of compensation. That's you're trying to make the reed an adjustment on your stereo or something where you're turning the volume down, making it darker or brighter or louder, softer. You shouldn't have to be doing that. That's a form of compensation. People are compensating all the time and they're being creative and they're adapting and they're doing what they can to make it work. And I can dig that. You have to do what you have to do because that's what you have to work with. But in an ideal situation, you shouldn't have to compromise by moving the reed, what I would consider incorrectly high or low.
Okay.
That's at least my take on it. Someone may have a different opinion, but if the reed is too high, sticking out, you're going to chip the reed by tonguing staccato. And if it's too low, your attack is going to be muffled and you're not going to have a crisp articulation. That's just my experience and my belief. Someone could argue it, but I don't think so. I don't.
And yeah, and the thing would be like doing that, someone doing that all the time, definitely I can see that. I'm just thinking too, like sometimes if you're on the bandstand, you got to swap out a reed and it's like, oh, whoa, yeah, this is stiff or whatever, and then it's a quick fix for the moment. But ideally, what you're saying, you shouldn't be doing that all the time. And totally, yeah, because that's
No, I think they're doing it because primarily people are doing that because they don't have the reed lined properly to begin with. If the tip rail is functioning properly, they should line it up once correctly and it should be fine. Now, if it's not lined up correctly, a micro adjustment to fix that so that it is lined up correctly is understandable. But to be saying, oh, the reed is a little hard, I'm going to move it up or I'm going to move it down because it's doing this, that's compensation. And I don't think that's correct. I just don't think so.
It's better to work on your reeds with like a reed geek or something, or just change the reed at that point.
Yeah, no, this is great because I've always been told that, and I'm admitting I've said that too because, that's what I was told, and sometimes when, the reed, not every reed in the box works, and that's another thing. So so you do want to adjust it and get
I can
it.
tell you this, in terms of trying mouthpieces, there's certain things that I do. I have a routine of things that I test for right away to know if the mouthpiece and the reed are behaving properly, that there are things, and we all do this to some degree. But first and foremost, you should play some music, not just scales and notes. You should actually try and feel how musical it is. Do I feel like playing a melody, or is it holding me back, or is something bothering me about it? Because ultimately, the goal is to you have a sound in your head and you want it to come out second nature. That's an important concept. If you're going to get to a higher level of performance, these things have to be second nature. Like Sonny Rollins said, when I'm playing my best, I'm not thinking about anything. You have to stop thinking about your equipment and get past that. That's part of our goal, is to have it so that people aren't thinking at all about their equipment. And it's just flowing. The music is flowing. It has to be second nature to get to that next level. But you have a sound in your head, and when you're testing a mouthpiece, how well does this equipment give you the sound that's in your head, or are you having to adjust to create that sound that's in your head? So first and foremost, I think it's important to have a concept. And if you don't have a concept, you better start listening to saxophone players and see who it is you like, or experimenting and figure out what's in your head that you like. But most people usually, unless they're beginners, they usually have a concept of what they want to sound like. Oh, I want to be a combination of this and that or whatever. That's great. That's fine. You can head for that, and whatever, it's going to mold into whatever you make it. It's going to come out like you no matter what, but at least you have a starting point of a concept of sound in your mind. Secondly, there are certain things that every saxophone player wants to be able to do easily. So you have to go through your things that are challenging for you. Today, every saxophone player likes to play altissimo real well, and they like to be very fluid up there. And that's part of their repertoire. That's part of their sound. That's part of what they do. I respect that. And that's part of their test. Because if they can't have flexibility in the upper register, then that's not good for them. Some saxophone players play with a lot of subtone all the time. If the mouthpiece doesn't do that, then it's not good for them. One of the things that personally I test for, because I try and do everything, a little of everything to make sure it's doing everything I need it to do. One of the things I do is some multiphonics, because how the reed breaks up for the multiphonics, I've got maybe half a dozen different little multiphonics things that if it's not easily achievable, then something's not optimal with the setup, either the reed or the mouthpiece. And that could be as simple as on tenor, your G breaks and your G or your A upstairs breaks up into that, that harmonic thing that everybody plays. And you should be able to turn it off and on those notes. You should be able to hit it pure, and you should be able to overblow it and get that harmonic out. If that's really hard to achieve, then perhaps something with the setup is not correct for you. So all these little things go into trying out a mouthpiece. But again, first and foremost, I think playing music and hearing your sound come back to you, does it inspire you, or are you struggling? Can you imagine yourself getting second nature with this, where you're not thinking about your mouthpiece, or are you thinking, how am I going to get to sound more like this or that?
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. And
And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
one thing I'd like to say on that is one of the biggest parts of my mind being blown when I first tried these pieces was I always felt like from different, even saxophones too, but really a lot of mouthpieces, I feel like there's a prescribed sound where it's very difficult for me to sound like myself. There's like sort of just like a vibe to it, and then there's no flexibility. That's what you get. And even with some vintage pieces, I feel like that, which is I feel like that's the one aspect why everyone is like crazy about various vintage pieces. It's like, oh, you could sound like yourself on them. But I think it's kind of a misconception. For some, definitely, but it's kind of like you never know what you're getting. And when I discovered Ted's mouthpieces, I finally found like, wow, this is finally my sound without this kind of like, it was almost like different mouthpieces were putting like a filter over my sound. And it was like, yeah, it's like the core of my sound is here, but there's this like other stuff too that I don't really care for, or that isn't me. And then trying Ted's pieces, it was finally like, there's my sound. And we have different models that do change this sound a bit, but the main thing for me was I finally didn't have to worry about objective aspects of the mouthpieces, and I could worry about subjective differences between the models.
Oh, talk about that. Okay. Is that the same thing that you're talking about in terms of like compensating and that kind of thing?
Not necessarily. What I mean is by objective aspects of the pieces, I'm looking for ease of playability, evenness throughout the range, great response, great tone color, stuff like that. Just knowing that this is a great playing piece. And then the subjective aspects are like the colors of the sound, right? So like, yeah, this is a little brighter, but it doesn't lose its warm core, or this one's darker, but it's not tubby. There's a range that we work in. But everything, I could say all our pieces play great. It's just sort of like different colors between the models.
Got it. Okay. Okay. And this is going to lead perfectly into the different models. But you know what? I want to ask a question first before that perfect question, or the perfect lead in. Why? Why? Okay. Here's what I mean. Like, what is it and you may not be able to tell us, for proprietary reasons, but what is it that you feel makes your mouthpieces give people the ability to have, like, this tonal palette, right? Yes, you're dealing with the objective types of things, but also, now we can get into the subjective. What makes your mouthpieces stand out in that way?
Well,
I can answer that.
okay.
I mean,
Okay.
it really does come down to the recipe, as it were, or the secret sauce. I mean, there is a combination of very specific facing curve and some other attributes, the core geometry. It's the design of the interior part of the mouthpiece, as well as the material, the overall shape, mass, everything. All these things together define what the sound of the mouthpiece is. Now we're trying to, getting back to what he was saying, like every saxophone player is trying to find their voice, right? And all the things he was just describing are attributes of that. And if the mouthpiece is functioning, all the parameters are functioning symbiotically at a very high level, then it's very easy to achieve all those things and find your voice. I mean, there's going to be the inherent sound of the mouthpiece itself, but it's going to be so easy to play and flexible enough that you can kind of go in several directions. I mean, different models, like he said, are going to sound different because that's how they're designed to sound. But with each design, if it's optimized to the level of what I'll call greatness, then it should be undeniable in terms of, okay, it's speaking, it's very easy to play, it's reed friendly. I feel like I can go in a whole bunch of different directions. Obviously players are going to have their preferences for tip opening and, darkness or brightness. And there's a whole lot of variety out there, and everybody's very specific because their needs are very specific. Because we're talking about your voice. Because as a saxophone player, how you hear yourself coming back, that's your musical ego. That's what you're presenting to the world. And, like the old cats impressed upon me way back when, sound is everything. I mean, of course, it's what you do with it and, how you deal with it. But that sound, that when you hear it coming back and it hits you a certain way, it makes you want to play. And, when I was around it makes me think of Big Nick Nicholas. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Big Nick Nicholas.
No.
But check him out. Go look up. I mean, he was the one who recommended that Bird record Autumn in New York with Bird with Strings. And I mean, Coltrane wrote the tune Big Nick for him, and he was an incredible tenor player, incredible personality, a giant of a man, a giant of, a heart of gold. And he was very giving, but his sound was unbelievable. I mean, just this big, huge, warm sound, and a big man with a big laugh, and his personality filled the room and his sound filled the room. It was just, I can't speak enough about him, and that, there's never going to be a person like that. He's a unique individual, but everybody's got their sound, and how you achieve that as a saxophone player is going to make you feel good about yourself as a saxophone player or not. Because we've all been there where nothing seems to work and you feel like you can't get your sound, and then you're miserable. And whether it's just a bad reed day or whatever it is, you don't have reeds, everything's whatever. When you can't be comfortable with your sound, then it affects you because you don't hear something pleasant coming back that reflects how you feel about yourself as a musician. So it makes you discouraged and feel like not playing.
Yeah.
And every saxophone player, I think, has gone through that
Yeah.
to some degree at some point.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
we're trying to help by making the best mouthpieces we can. And, um, hopefully we have helped a lot of people. We get a lot of positive feedback and a lot of people are playing the pieces. And, we're serious about what we do and we're passionate. And it is a recipe or some secret sauce it's a whole lot of details put together. And one little minor detail can be off, and then it's not perfect. And sometimes things need to be corrected, or things wear over time and need to be touched up. It's it's very specific and rather complex. And it does require this hands-on approach that even you can get a machine to put a curve on it, the repeatability of that, even you dialed it in with the machine, um, the cutting tool wears a little bit, and all of a sudden the measurements slightly off. We're talking about thousandths of an inch, such a small degree has an effect. And I've spent all these years studying, well, what does what affects, it's basically empirical data, trial and error, and understanding what does what. And over time, it's like I have a very strong concept of I know this works for this particular application. And it's been tested so many times that I have to say, okay, I have enough data to say that this is a fact. This is, this works. And I would say it's proven out by the people.
Yeah.
They agree with me. So I mean, if I was just on my own tangent and said, well, this is empirical data that works for me, but other people might not have the same feeling. But I've been doing this for a long time, and the refacing thing I learned many years ago, it's satisfying like 99% of the people. Some of the people you can never satisfy, but that's just life. But yeah.
This is so interesting. There's so many like golden nuggets that you're sharing here. Um, when it comes to you making your mouthpieces, so can you talk about that process before we get to the models? Can you talk about that process? Like, it's hand finished. I understand that, but what about, you get the blank, then what happens, what happens after that? Can you talk about that?
Um, well, it depends on what type of manufacturing process the blanks. I mean, we've made RTV molded, injection molded, machined, cast, um, all different types of processes. And depending on what created the blank, will lead to what needs to be done. But I could just talk about castings. I mean, for example, castings, you have a metal blank that's rough and it has sprues, casting sprues that need to be sanded off, and the whole thing needs to be sanded and lapped. And then you basically have to create the facing curve by hand, which we have machines that do certain things, but we create the table and then the facing curve. And in doing that, will require sculpting the tip rail and the baffle profile and all that from that point. So at that point, the table becomes the standard, so there's a series of operations that go into that. And I mean, the handcrafted castings have hours of human labor into them, hours and hours. And that's why they're so expensive. I mean, the machined ones are closer, much closer, and the injection molded ones and post mold machined ones and RTV, there's various degrees of things that need to be done depending on the manufacturing method, but they all ultimately need to be final hand finished. Some more than others. If, we have some been working so hard with the machining side of it to get some blanks that are so close that we can lower the price to the point where, because the hand finishing is much less time required than the stuff we've been doing up to this point. So they should be more consistent, and they're still hand finished, but they're not hours of hand finishing. They're less than that, and therefore we can put a more reasonable price. We're not trying to compete with the lower priced mouthpieces. Some of them are, I should say, in the category of good. They're good mouthpieces. The fit and finish is good. They're fairly well finished, but they're lacking in some areas. And that's why I would say they're good and not great, because they're machined and hand finished, but only to a certain level. And I'm not going to name any brands or
Sure,
things
yeah.
like that, but
Yeah.
it's not the level of care and accuracy that we put into our products. I don't
Got it.
really see other companies out there, or very few, that are doing it to this level of precision. There may be a couple others that are more in the same realm of what we're doing in terms of handcrafted, that are making precisely finished mouthpieces. But again, my recipe or secret sauce, or whatever you want to call it, for all these attributes being put together to make a great playing mouthpiece, are specific to our company.
Got it. Got it. This is great. And thank you for sharing this. And why don't we get into the models? Why don't we get into the models, talk about that, also talk about, some of the artists that specifically play certain models and stuff like that.
Okay. Would you like to speak on that, Michael?
Okay, yeah. So, I don't know where to start. I'll start with
Start with what you play.
okay, I personally play I have two mouthpieces on tenor and two on alto. And on tenor, I'm mostly playing a focus tone precision. And that piece is kind of it's inspired by like Supertone Master, Auto-Link Supertone Master, but really like Ted's design is very different from Supertone Master, and I've played a bunch of those and a bunch of focus tone precisions, and there is a very different vibe to them. I find that the focus tone precisions are a bit more flexible tonally, and the direction of the sound is a bit different. I feel like sometimes the Supertone Masters are like really like narrow, and sometimes they're really spread. They're kind of like all over the place. But I find the focus tone precisions have a nice amount of spread to them without getting like too much. Yeah, there's still like a great focused core to them. And that's what I love about it. I mean, to me, it's extremely flexible and versatile mouthpiece that I could use in so many different situations. So I have that, and I also have a Florida model for tenor, and also a great mouthpiece if I want more of a hard rubber kind of vibe. I'll play that. And that piece is more inspired by the hard rubber Florida links that were being made. And every mouthpiece that I say that is inspired by something, it's just that. It's inspired by whatever particular vintage mouthpiece existed, but it's Ted's, concept applied to that. So these are not copies.
Right. That's important. Yeah, they're not copies. That's important for people to know.
Exactly. Yeah. They're not copies. To me, it's an improvement on the models that have existed prior, which is something that's really important because I think a lot of saxophonists, me included, had this like notion that it doesn't get better than vintage. I don't know why it is, but there's this sort of mentality that oh, in order to sound good, I have to spend $1,500 on like a mint condition supertone master, and then I could sound good, or something like that, or like get like a super expensive reso chamber. But that's not the case. I think that Ted has really taken the aspects that made those pieces great and has refined them. Uh, and
Would you say, I'm just wondering if people that, feel that, gosh, I've got to have that vintage mouthpiece because, it's iconic, all this kind of thing. Could it be because it's coming from, they want to sound like their hero who was from that era, and they
Mhm.
feel that the mouthpiece is going to make them sound like their hero as compared to the tonal concept, having that, and then having a piece that will allow that concept to come out.
Exactly. I think that's true. I can think of so many players who've gotten got collections of vintage mouthpieces trying to do just that. They want to sound like whoever. And after going through thousands and thousands of dollars on vintage pieces, and then they'll get a piece from me or a couple of pieces from me, and they wind up selling all their vintage. I can't tell you how many people have said, I'm selling all my vintage pieces thanks to you, and just getting one more of this size as a backup for my blah blah, whatever it is. So that has happened so much. And,
That's
you
awesome.
know, not that that's, I'm not saying everyone should do that. I mean, some people, there's reasons to have vintage mouthpieces. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to say we can replace those, but I mean, if you're happy and you're playing something that you can get today and it's doing better for you to get the sound that's in your head rather than the drawer full of, $1,000 vintage pieces, then
Right.
why are you keeping them? So
Mm.
that's what's happened a lot. You know, there are things, attributes of the vintage pieces that you know, are going to be what they're going to be. I mean, the rubber ages. Rubber's in a constant state of getting harder and more brittle. So
Yeah.
these old pieces that are 50 to 100 years old, if you don't drop it on the floor, it's going to shatter
Yeah.
instead of bounce, but it's going to have a different sound because the rubber is much older, and it's been, material scientists have described it as, well, it's outgassing. It's perpetually outgassing. It's drying out.
Wow.
It's the rubber is hardening and drying out, just like those of us who remember the old Converse sneakers. When they get too old, the rubber gets yellow and cracked and hard. And
That's
it's the
right.
same thing with mouthpieces. It does age, and even brass ages. So I mean, I've had the experience of having castings and filing the cast brass or bronze and feeling how it feels under the file. And I was like, wow, it feels softer and a little more malleable than a vintage Auto Link, which just feels a little crunchier under the file. I wonder why that is, a different alloy or whatever. But then I'll get castings that I did, and I'll get one back for refacing that was 10 years old, and I'll file it, and it feels completely different. The brass has aged and it's crunchier now. It's harder.
Wow.
It was explained to me that the molecular state changes over time. It crystallizes more. And then if you heat it up, it reverts to an earlier state. They know about this, work hardening, brass, annealing, all this kind of thing. It does change on a molecular level. So that being said, some of these really old links or whatever from the 50s that are 75 years old now,
Oh
the
God.
brass is different. It's different, or the bronze, or whatever it may be. It's different. The alloys, there's a million different alloys, of course, but also the age of it. That's why drummers want the old cymbals, the old Zildjian Ks. I mean, it changes. I mean, even cymbal makers. I've been to cymbal makers, and the guy says, "Yeah, I hand hammer it 1,000 times, and then I have to let it sit for a couple weeks, and it changes the sound by just time."
Mm.
So, vintage pieces have something that new pieces won't have in terms of that. Um, but as Michael said, I've tried to take the best aspects of these vintage pieces because I mean, I was studying. I can't tell you how many tone edge links, great slants as they call them. I refaced back in the 80s. I mean, thousands of them. And I figured out what works and what's the best one and this and that and what all these attributes that seem to make it play really great. And I've distilled what I've known and come to find out in years of doing that. And as Michael said, refined it into my version of that. So, I mean, they're not all consistent way back then. They're, as people who collect that stuff knows, each one is different. They don't all play the same.
Yeah.
And we're trying to make something with a high level of consistency that there's no bad apples, that everyone is play tested and hand finished. So we know what's going on with it. And I apply those principles that I've discerned over all these years to each and every one based on my design, which is a refinement of all that I've come to understand about those particular pieces.
That's
In
awesome.
terms of anyone looking for any kind of gear, to me, there are three aspects that make both saxophones and mouthpieces great. And you have to have all three aspects in order to have anything that's decent. And the first thing is design has to be a great design, has to have great material, and the execution of it has to be great. There's earlier I said, you could spend however much money on a vintage mouthpiece and you don't really know what you're going to get because the design might be great, the material might be great, but if someone worked on it and messed it up, or if it just came out of the factory, with not a great facing, it's not going to be good. It won't even matter. Like I just bought a King Zephyr Special Alto, and that Alto, I know it's a great design. I know that it's the highest like quality material that you can get, but it needed an overhaul. So, it didn't play great before the overhaul. And once I got it back, it was, incredible horn. So it's risky to get anything that you can't guarantee has all three aspects.
Mm.
But for us, I can confidently say that Ted's designs are incredible, that we use the highest quality materials that you can get, and the execution of the work that we do is at the highest level.
That's awesome. And you know what? We're going to get back to the models. You know what I wanted to ask too, the material, the marbled finishes. I have to talk about that because they're not just eye-catching, they're beautiful. So can you just talk about the marble finishes and stuff?
Sure. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to go to the factory in Germany where this material is produced, and the owner is so passionate about the material from an artistic point of view that they've pursued a variety of different marbled materials, and we've tried a number of them, but I have to say at this point we're trying to narrow it down to only a couple of choices because each one has processing slight differences, which does present challenges. And quite frankly, to keep all the different varieties in stock is challenging to say the least. So it is a beautiful material. It's beautiful to look at. This marbled material is used in other high-end applications, high-end car part knobs, like for I don't know, Porsches or whatever. They use them in different applications. But it is a beautiful, luxurious material. And obviously what people will be interested in is, well, what does it sound like? What is the difference in the sound? So
Yeah.
I'll jump right into that. It's the straight black German ebonite has a little more bright, resonant, typical hard rubber sound. And again, hard rubber is um, it's a recipe in and of itself. And depending on how it's processed, each day might be a little different. So, they describe it to me. It's like baking a cake. Some days it rises,
Oh,
more than other days because it's vulcanized. I mean, the process is they take latex rubber and mix it with sulfur and linseed oil and ebonite powder, which is baked latex that's pulverized into a powder. So they mix all those things together and then they vulcanize it a couple of steps, like twice or something. I don't know exactly what they do, but it's under heat and pressure. And sometimes they add some other ingredients, they might add carbon or whatever. So the marbled one is a whole nother process. And I would describe it as it creates an ebonite that has a little more warmth to it, a little more color. I mean, I don't want to sound like a wine description, but it does. I mean, my Broadway saxophone player friend who's got every mouthpiece and ligature that there is, he uses it. He's like, well, in certain pits, I like the marbled one, but sometimes I prefer the black one. So it's situation dependent for him. It does give a little depth of sound that the black doesn't have, but the black has a little brightness or snap that the marbled may not have. So it's and we're talking subtle, but noticeable. It's not some end all thing that like, oh, this plays much better because of the marbled or something. It's a slight subtle difference, but it's there. And I'm sure every player could discern the difference in the material. Both have attributes. I can't say one's better than the other. Some people might like one better than the other, but the jury's still out on that one, and it's always going to be out. So it's a subjective thing.
got it. And I think it also depends on, as you mentioned, your friend that plays Broadway stuff. I think it depends on the style, not the style of music that I guess the
Sure.
style of the song. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It
Hmm.
really depends on that. And this is where you can get those subtle subjective, right? Those subtle subjective types of things, differences and
Right.
stuff.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is a guy who can play a lot of different styles depending on what's called for. So he might use the marbled one if he's got to do a Paul Desmond type of sound, and then he might use the black one if he's got to do some more R&B stuff. I don't know, just
Got
as
it.
an example, but there are there is an overriding difference that can be described as the marbled has a little more depth of sound of color. It's got some little warmth in there that the black doesn't have, and the black one's got like a little more resonant, typical resonance that you come to expect from a hard rubber piece.
And then in talking about that and getting back to the models, so some of the models, are they based on the fact that, if they're marbled, it's going to have that kind of tonal palette, so to speak?
Um, Not really. I tend to make the design um specific to the sound that I'm trying to get, and then the different material is just a slight alternative in the execution of that design. I don't make the design specifically for marbled.
Got it. So the design is based on the sound that you want to achieve, and then you
Yes.
have okay, and then the different finishes, whether it's marble or just black ebonite, that's going to give it variety, a little bit of variety, so to speak.
Yes.
Got it. Awesome. Cool. Then let's do this. Then let's continue with like the models and stuff like that.
Well, we do have a lot of models now,
Yeah.
don't we? This might require a whole nother interview for just the models.
All right, so we'll go briefly, into them just so we keep people get an idea, and like at the end we'll definitely tell people where to go to find you guys for sure. Yeah, so yeah.
Okay. Well, I can cover it briefly to say, I mean, we came up with the London model, which is inspired by the concept of Berg Larsen, meaning that it's got the bullet style chamber. And I was specifically for the tenor, I was inspired by the sound of certain players who used that for their whole career, especially Coleman Hawkins. Well, he used it in the later half of his career, but Yusef Lateef used that primarily his whole career, as far as I know. And he had an incredible, huge sound. There's stories of him in Chicago before he was Yusef Lateef. His name was Bill Evans. And there's a story that saxophone players went to each other, says, hey, there's a guy down at the bar playing, shaking the drinks off the bar. His sound is so big, and his name is Bill Evans. And they all went down, and that was Yusef Lateef. And he was playing a Berg. And, so many players have played Berg, and, it is a great design, a great, Berg Larsen's a legend. So to execute that design concept is something that I said, well, I have to try this. And, we went through the trial and error and all kind of things. And there's so many varieties I have a collection of them, some of the real early Bergs, the bronze ones from the 40s and 50s. And that's our London model tenor, and we do have it in hard rubber and metal. And now I decided later on to have a London model alto based on Jackie McLean's hard rubber Berg that Abraham Burton Jackie had given it to Abraham, and Abe was kind enough to lend that to me along with some other examples that I had. And we designed the London model alto based on that. And the London model, like the Berg, it has so much power and projection and center of sound. The Bergs can be overly bright and harsh, and I think I've tamed them down to the point where they're more suitable for today's needs or for the type of sound that I envision that model having. And they've been quite successful. And in terms of the tenor, we have the London Precision model, which is a slimmer diameter. And then we have the new London model, which is a fatter diameter in terms of the brass. I'm just going to keep rambling on about these models because there are a lot of them. We've also applied that, since I'm on the London model, we've applied that to the baritone as well.
Oh, cool.
Because we decided to come out with a baritone model, and I got with my baritone playing friends, and we decided if we're going to have one model, it should probably be this because it's so baritone friendly. There have been a lot of requests to make a larger chamber baritone, which I would love to do, but there's only 24 hours in the day, and I've been squeezing 25 out for the past 30 years. I'm getting pretty tired. Anyway, we've got the London model baritone, and it's been quite popular, and it's worked very well with modern baritones. It's not necessarily a match for some older cons or certain large diameter bore necks might not match with that mouthpiece in terms of intonation, but all in all, it's been very popular with most modern baritones. And getting back to the different models, we have the New York model Alto and Tonamax Alto. New York model Alto is designed after a New York Meyer Brothers model, the old fatter Meyers, which I've had a collection of those. I played those for many years in my cannonball phase when I was just deeply into studying the style and sound of cannonball, who's one of my loves of that I aspire to in the sound during that period. And I had a collection of those, so of course I wanted to make something like that, and they've been one of our top sellers. We have the Tonamax Alto, which is the Tonamax design is really the alto version of the focus tone tenor design.
Okay.
So it is a unique design that's not based on anything but my own um, my own concept, and it's a little bigger chamber than the New York, and it's got a fuller, fatter sound. Um, it's been popular as well. Um, the biggest thing that I'm really excited about right now for Alto is our Yardbird. Um, Yardbird design was based on the Selmer, England FF mouthpiece, which is a very rare mouthpiece. It was the piece that Charlie Parker played for the last 5 years or so of his life, um, exclusively. Every picture where he's playing a metal mouthpiece, that was what it was. And for years, I was trying to figure out what that was. Eventually, I did figure it out, and my good friend Jesse Davis actually found one and sent it to me, and that became the first beginning of that design project. So I wound up locating a couple other ones due to the kindness of a friend, John Bowes in Chicago. He sent me one to repair, and I loved it so much. I had a hard time giving it back to him, and this cat was so beautiful. He finally said, "Man, you have to have this mouthpiece," and he gave it to me, which
Wow.
is I'm forever indebted to him. And I designed based off of that. We scanned it and tweaked it and this and that, and we started machining them and making them in hard rubber, and they're they're doing quite well. Students, I mean, there's some students, band directors who are buying them every year for their students, the hard rubber ones, because they're affordable and they're not overly bright. They've got a big, fat, full sound, but they project and they've got warmth, and they're closer to the sound of Charlie Parker. And to me, I mean, that's the bar to be set. I mean, people can say what they want about what the saxophone should sound like, but um, he's the master of all masters. And the sound that he got on Alto, it didn't matter what mouthpiece he played, he always sounded, incredible. So there's that.
It's true.
But to get close to that, most mouthpieces today don't make it easy to sound like Charlie Parker. I'll say that. And the Yardbird, coming from the design that he wound up playing the last 5 years of his career, is a lot easier to get close to that sound. So for those of us, I believe in so much in everything Charlie Parker. That's a whole nother conversation. But just sound wise, for those of us who aspire to that, this model is something that you owe it to yourself to check out. And I'm actually working on getting some solid silver castings of that based on really close to the original design. The machine version is, again, my adaptation of that, which is done very well. And it's been popular. It sounds great. I've been playing it. Other people have been playing it. A whole lot of people have been playing it. And it's, the brass version and the hard rubber version, which is the affordable one. Both of them have done quite well.
That's cool.
And I'm really excited about that model. What have I not covered here?
The X.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been a call for a brighter, more R&B mouthpiece, which is obviously something that we can do. It's not been my focus, admittedly, over the year, but I met with some very heavy distributors from Asia who said, well, 90% of the market is smooth jazz, and you make a great jazz mouthpiece, but we're not interested. We want we want what people want. So we said, okay, well, high baffle mouthpiece. I mean, I have a lot of friends who that's their area of expertise in terms of sound. It's not mine necessarily, but I've collaborated with them, and that goes to, Dukoff D8, David Sanborn. That's that's a no-brainer when it comes to that. And that being said, I remember people lusting after that piece way back in the 80s and 90s, and I refaced a bunch of them in that strange material that those were made from. But there was actually a hard rubber version of it that was very rare. Hard rubber Dukoff D8 Alto mouthpiece.
I didn't know that.
And I got a hold of one and it plays great. And again, I didn't copy it exactly, but I made some modifications based on what I know works. And we came up with a design, which we called the TKX model. And it was primarily designed to satisfy those who are looking for a high baffle R&B type, brighter, powerful mouthpiece that does that extremely well, that type of style. So
Is that just for alto, or is it alto and tenor?
so far it's just for alto. Tenor is in the works. I mean,
Got
again,
it.
there's only 24 hours in my 25-hour day. So I'm trying to, we're trying to keep up with orders and the models that we have. And yeah, I can get ambitious and try and go in a million different directions, but that wouldn't be productive. So we have to kind of take care of things step by step. So yeah, we're coming out with the alto first, and eventually we do plan to come out with the tenor version of that.
That's really cool. And yeah, it looks like yeah, so this is interesting that you mentioned the TKX model, because as I'm always take notes when I do my podcast and stuff. I just like to do that. And I'm thinking, okay, so a lot of this is like honoring the masters and stuff like that. Well, it's David Sanborn was a master too, right?
Sure.
But yeah, now covering that tonal palette, so like adding to the colors and all that kind of thing that you're offering, I think is really cool. And it's going to be, again, there's only so many hours in the day, right? But
Mhm.
having that offering, and then being able to eventually offer that in tenor, I think that's gonna be huge for you. That's gonna be insanely huge for you when that happens, you know?
Yes.
But the other thing too, I didn't even know that there was a hard rubber version of that Dukoff. I didn't know that.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
That is
It's rare.
interesting. Yeah, that's why. This is so cool. I mean, it just everything that you've done. Let me ask you this thing. Um,
Mhm.
in terms of, like people wanting to try out your mouthpieces and stuff like that, what do they do? Give us the process for that.
Okay. Well, I mean, Michael can describe that. We have a trial policy.
Yeah, so you can either set up an appointment and come here. Although our hours are a bit limited, because again, this is a production facility. It's not really a store, so
Okay.
we have to do what we can to stay on track of our production schedule. But a lot of people buy. You can buy up to three mouthpieces and return two at the most. So long as you keep one, you can return the others, and you could get full refund for those. Just so long as you keep one. Typically, if you buy a mouthpiece and then return it, there's you could either get it for store credit. If that model didn't work for you and you just want to try a different model, we could do that. Or you could just return it for a refund, but then there's a 10% restocking fee. So buying multiple mouthpieces will negate that restocking fee
Got it.
for the two that you return.
I have another question for you too. Do you recommend any particular kind of ligature, or any particular kind of reed? Because that's hard, because everybody's personalized, right? All that kind of thing. But I'm just wondering if you do have any of those kind of recommendations or not. It's not that'd be interesting.
Um, Reads, I don't want to really get into because it's so subjective, and I don't want to get behind anybody in particular right now. But ligatures, it's also very subjective, but we really like the Mark John ligature very much. And Mark John, uh, he's kind of in the same area we are, that he makes everything himself. They're basically they're machine, but they're handmade. He does all the work himself, and they're really great. They perform really well. He's got proprietary designs, patented designs. They've got a plate that contacts the reed, a resonance plate that is made from either grenadilla wood or hard rubber, and that's what touches the reed. And we sell them. We have a certain supply of them. They're hard to keep in stock and hard to get, but we do have them, and they sell out quick. And I use them every day. We all use them every day. It's the go-to ligature. I mean, our pieces come with a standard 2-screw ligature, which is adequate and it works fine. A lot of guys say, "Oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with this ligature. It plays great," and it does. But the Mark John is definitely an upgrade. It's got it livens it up a little bit. It's got more depth to the sound. It really is a fine ligature, and he's a great guy, makes a great product, and we're proud to have him as part of our offerings.
Awesome. Cool. Well, first of all, thank you for your time. But before we go, how can people get a hold of you, on the internet, on the socials?
Well, our web, tedklum.com is our website, and I'm sure you can find us on social media. You want to speak on that a little bit? I'm from the other side of this.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have Instagram and Facebook. Just look up Ted Klum Mouthpieces. I believe that's the handle for both.
Got it.
Yeah, if you need to reach out on our website, there's a contact form for email. I typically answer the emails. So if you have any questions or anything and you send it through there, I'll get back to you. It might take a day or two, but I get back to every email we get. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and just to let everybody know too, on our saxophonepodcast.com site for the Everything Saxophone Podcast, we will have links to the website, to the socials. And before we go too, name some of your endorsees, endorsed people that play for you, because I think people are going to be pretty impressed.
Oh, well, I mean, Jesse Davis, Seamus Blake, Mark Turner, Emmanuel Wilkins,
Sarah
Hanahan, Nicole Glover, Abraham Burton,
what's his name? I'm forgetting his name. The guy that was here the other day.
So many people come through.
Yeah.
It's like a blur.
It sounds like a lot of New York heavy hitters too.
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of the straight ahead heavy cats,
We talked about Shihai Lee from China, because I
yes.
saw his video on your Instagram thing and I was like, oh my God, the sound. I'm going to say this to everybody. And actually, when you listen to the audio podcast of this, I'm going to start off with a little excerpt of Shihai Lee. I hope I'm saying your name right. I apologize if I don't, but listen to that. And then I'll be playing it in the background as I do the introduction. And then check out Ted Klum Mouthpieces Instagram site and look for the video, because you're going to be your jaw's going to drop. First of all, the guy can play, but his sound is insane. It's just insane. It's really awesome, and all these people too. Holy cow. Yeah. I mean, this is incredible. And the other thing too, that really impressed me looking at like Instagram, what you guys do, which is really smart. And this, it's smart for marketing purposes, but also social proof is really important. You're sharing people's reactions to your mouthpieces, like this person said this, this person said that. And like, oh my gosh, I don't need any of my other mouthpieces anymore. Boom, I'm selling them. I'm using Ted Klum stuff, so that's really important. It's really impressive. And it just shows, it attests to all the hard work and the care that you put in. And you know what? This is good way to like kind of bring this together. What I've just in the short time that we've talked, and I'm so glad. I wanted to do this at NAMM, but you know what, to be honest with you, I think this was better doing this here, because people
Yes.
really
Yeah.
truly don't understand how noisy it is at NAMM, and it's important for you there to make the connections that you need to make to expand your business. But this was awesome because what I got out of this is the craftsmanship, the level of meticulousness and detail and care. And it's not just about making a mouthpiece. It's about making an impact and making a legacy. Like the great masters that did on the horns, on playing the horns with music. You've as a player, you understand that. As when you were in the studio mixing and mastering, you understood that. But then you brought that um that thinking, that level of hard work, trying to get 25 hours out of a 24-hour day, to mouthpiece making, first to refacing and then the mouthpiece making. I commend you for that. That's really awesome. And it's so great. I'm so happy to expose more people to you. So this way they can get to know you better, try out the mouthpieces, and just this whole list that you were rattling off, and you got so many people you can't remember them. That's that just it says a lot for what you guys do. I really congratulations on all your success.
Well, thank you so much.
Awesome, cool. Thank you so much for your time, guys.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.